Hello world, hello internet, and welcome to the 11th episode of the 2023 Nix Developer Dialogues. I am Valentin, your host. My host name is Frickler Handwerk, and in this show about people and stories from the Nix ecosystem, we will meet the man who started the story a long time ago. And before we start here, let me remind our live audience to send us your questions and comments, or put them on Matrix, or join the studio. You will find all the details on the NixOS Discourse. Search for Nix Developer Dialogues. After the show, we will put all the links to the things we talk about on that page. And now, without further ado, let's welcome our guests today, Eelco and Ron.
Hello.
Hey, everybody.
So, Eelco, you probably don't need much introduction, but still, I'll spend some time on it. About 20 years ago, you started Nix. You started working on the code base and eventually published your PhD thesis after a series of academic papers. Only a few years later, NixOS appeared on the scene, and a lot of stuff happened in between, and I hope that we will have some time to talk about that as well. But now you're still here. You're still working on the Nix code base, among many other things. One of them is that you're a co-founder of a company called Determinate Systems, and some of the other things you do together with Ron, who's also on the NixOS Foundation board. Ron, you joined the board last year, and you are also the CEO of Phlox, a company like Determinate Systems built on top of Nix. Now, you're together with Eelco and the other board members are driving lots of the efforts to help people in the community become more effective at what they're doing. And our topic today will be news from the NixOS Foundation, keeping the lights on. And before we get into any of the detail, I hope that you will tell us more about yourself by answering my now traditional first and obvious question. And it is a bit weird for Eelco because you will definitely have a different story than anyone else for saying who or what got you into Nix, specifically making Nix, and what keeps you around.
So what got me into Nix? Well, yeah, so I started it, but I guess you could say who got me creating it was my PhD supervisor, Eelco Visser. So at the time we were thinking about software composition and how to improve that. And I had a sort of interest in package management because in addition to being a PhD student, I also had a side gig as a system administrator at a small institute. So I was kind of interested in tools like RPM, and they had all sorts of problems. So I kind of got, and our group was very much into functional programming languages. So I started to think about how we can merge those things. And so that's how it got started.
And you're still here. What keeps you around? What makes you stick to the whole thing?
Really
I mean, it's been 20 years.
He really
Inertia.
likes with me a lot. So.
Exactly.
Board meeting.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's still fun. And it's amazing to see that this project still keeps growing and people find new places to use Nix. And so that's has been really amazing to see. So I wouldn't want to miss seeing where that continues to grow and expand into.
Ron, what about you? So I heard you at the last recent GitHub Universe talk that you said you got into Nix very recently and you haven't known about for the longest time, and then people convinced you of what is all about. What happened there? How did you come to Nix? And I mean, apart from being CEO of a Nix-based company, what keeps you around?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in short, before Phlox, I was running developer products for Facebook, and one of the projects there that I was leading was moving all of our local development to be injected with kind of like cloud-based optimization, so build environments, all of that. And we actually built up an entire team to replicate the entire tool chain on Linux servers. And I think that was back then around 2019 and early 2020, where I was like, holy shit, this is incredibly complex. Software has gotten to a level of complexity that we have to go through so many steps in order to just build the things that we want to build and take into account the things that we want to take into account. And that's where coincidentally, I kind of stumbled across this insane community and across Nix. And about at the same time, it's also where I connected with Michael, who back in 2017 kind of realized that even before me and was trying to kind of bring Nix into an enterprise setting inside of Dijon. And So that's what got me into Nix, and obviously biased now. The things keeping me around is just that I genuinely believe that this is the future of software. You mentioned the GitHub Universe talk. I talk about the concept of the squeeze. I think software development has gone insanely complex. I think it's just going to get further complex. And I think that we need to revisit base principles on how we started off developing software from like 40 years ago. And I think Nix does just that. So that's a bit from my end.
Eelco, maybe you can expand a little bit on these base that on which we think about software today. What is Nix's role in that?
So Nix's role is sort of as the universal composition tool. So there are, of course, a lot of package managers out there, like NPM, that sort of, or Cargo. So Nix is great because it can build anything. So you can use it to compose arbitrary software systems. So it started out as a package manager, but because it was so generic, it was very easy to adapt it into building complete operating system distributions, or if you can build it in a pure reproducible automatic way, then Nix is the tool for that. And so I guess you could say our goal is to get Nix everywhere. So everything that has an automated build process should ideally be using Nix. I mean, there are some technical obstacles why not everybody can use Nix for everything, but I think we're working hard on fixing those limitations. So that's kind of how I see Nix everywhere.
So Eelco, in the first NixCon in 2015, you had your inaugural talk where you also talked about the NixOS Foundation and why that was founded. Back in the day, you said you kind of just needed a place and a bank account to collect money to run servers, the build servers and the cache. Why was the foundation made, and what became of it until today? What's the history of the foundation?
Yeah, so the main goal at the time was to just provide some continuity. At the time, and still, our infrastructure mostly runs on the donations from sponsors. So, for example, the company that I used to work at, Logic Blocks, later Infor, paid for the binary cache. In addition to that, we had some Hetzner servers, and those were run by the foundation. But for the most part, we didn't have a lot of costs. But we, of course, had this worry that if this sponsorship disappears at some point in the future, we don't want to have to panic and have to, delete all our AWS resources and bye-bye cache.nixos.org. So that's why we said, that was one of the reasons. So we set up the foundation to make sure we have some money in the bank account and a place where we can collect donations for that, and also a legal entity that can pay for things like those Hetzner servers. So at the time, and stuff like sponsoring for NixCon. So we need somebody to send the invoices to sponsors, and of course a bank account to receive that money. That was kind of why we set up the foundation. So pretty modestly, and it was very explicitly not to do any sort of technical leadership. So we didn't set a roadmap. We didn't run the GitHub NixOS organization. It was a pretty modest role.
Ron, maybe as a glimpse into the next minutes, is that still the case today? What's the role of the foundation today?
I think it's just an evolution, right? So I think the foundation rightfully started as a way to support what Nix needed in 2015. And today, I think it just kind of evolved to do that, but also start being forward-looking, right? And again, going back to the basis that I think many of us really truly believe that Nix can change how we think about and do software. And for us, I think the foundation today is just to do two things. One, and I think that's what it did in 2015, is keep the lights on. maybe keep the lights on a bit better, more aggressively, because we might have more lights or bigger lights to keep on. But two, also help and set the stage for the next phases of Nix. So it's kind of like a proactive, what lights would we need to keep on a year from now, 2 years from now, 10 years from now, and what can we do in order to make sure that that's sustainable, scalable, and as optimized as possible for the community. So just like a nuance to it, if we want to dive deeper, obviously.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk more about the future towards the end of the show. But right now we'll talk a bit of about the past and the why. And I have one why question to you, Eelco. Why is it called the NixOS Foundation and not the Nix Foundation? Because Nix is at the core, at the heart of the ecosystem.
Yeah, so I don't remember with complete certainty why. I think it was just because our domain name was nixos.org. So it was more consistent to also call it the NixOS Foundation. And so we didn't have a Nix domain name. We do now, nix.dev. So the bylaws of the foundation, I think they don't actually mention Nix or NixOS. They just talk about how our goal is to promote the purely functional software deployment model. So it's pretty general, yeah.
So the foundation board was restructured last year, as I already hinted at. Ron, you joined the board and Armine left, if I remember correctly. Why did that happen, Ron? Why did the board need new members? Or did it even need new members?
I think for us, it started a bit before that. I think Eelco and I were kind of looking at, okay, right, where is Nix today and where do we think Nix needs to be or could be, right? And as Eelco said, none of this is related to the technical direction of Nix. It's just more of a community as a project. What's our vision? And I think it was pretty obvious that our vision is that we want Nix to be a household name. We want more people to utilize it and leverage it. And we truly want more and more folks to think about software development with Nix core principles in mind when we go about it. And for us, that meant that there was a lot of things that we felt the foundation could start doing more of in order to support, empower, and provide the community whatever they need to kind of hit those goals, at a wider scale. So I think that was the initial thinking behind it. And I think even the first document that we wrote up was really badly named because I personally also suck with naming things. It was just called Stronger Nix. It's like, what can we do to make Nix stronger? And I think that's where we started looking at kind of the overarching picture. It's okay, there's keeping the lights on, there's like having a little budget for infra, but what about partnerships? What about, even though we don't want to take decisions or make decisions, how can we empower or help others make those decisions? And those were things that started coming into mind. How can we start formulating fundraising, like formal fundraising? How can we open up fundraising to other sub areas of the project and kind of create a formal pipeline for that? And those are the things that I think started becoming top of mind, because when we look, we've been around for 20 years, but when we look at just where we want Nix to be in 5, hopefully it's scaled, it's big, and that requires a foundational base.
Eelco, who else is on the board besides you? Who's doing that support, that empowering teams?
Yeah, I can maybe add to why we want to expand the board. So since the start, we had a 3-man board. So it was me, Rob Vermaas, and Armine Hemel. And Rob and Armine, after 7 years of doing this stuff, they were kind of sick and tired of it. So they wanted to move on. And also in the meantime, the NixOS Foundation had kind of expanded what it was doing. So it had taken on the NGI Zero project, so it was part of the Next Generation Internet Consortium, and was doing the Summer of Nix as part of that. And that was a lot of extra work. Certainly with Rob and Armine leaving, we really wanted more board members. We got Ron, we got Domen Kassar from Cashix, we got Theophane Hoesmit from Tweak, and at the time we also had Graham Christensen as a board observer, sort of as a bridge to the community. So that's our current board. And I think, so currently we're at 4 board members, and I think we would like at least one more board member, because yeah, it's a bit on the small side. There is something of an ideal board size, probably something like 5 people, not too much more, but also not less than that. So yeah.
Jonas Chevalier was also on the.
Jonas is also observer on the board.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this question probably has been asked a lot of times. What's the process to become a board member? Why don't you just add more board members, such as Jonas, who's already an observer?
So currently, we basically interview them, and we ask, so yeah, do you have enough time to spend on this, and what do you bring to the foundation, and yeah, I mean, obviously it's also a personal relationship. So do we know this person? So it needs to be somebody with kind of a good reputation in the community. Yeah, that's basically it. And then the legal step is, I mean, we need to register these people as a board member. But,
I think from my perspective also, it's just there's also 2 sides to that. I think to the process to become a board member, I think we announced at NixCon that we're going to have that fully defined. There's going to be a rotation, and there's going to be like year limits and all of that. And I think that will be kind of like the process behind it, and we'll have that set up, and that, I think that would be great. The other side of it is that a lot of the work in the board is actually very hands-on, roll up your sleeves. Like, we need to get some stuff done. So it's like, we need to get, tax, legal, we need to work on partnerships, we need to get funding. It's like, it's not really, there isn't a lot of decision making. So I think you also asked, you mentioned that Jonas is a board observer and not a board member. And I think on that side, the board has never voted. Right. So we've never had like a vote where we needed to kind of each come in and say our piece, and we had counter votes or something like that. It's always been kind of like, hey, we're working on this, the community needs that. Who can raise their hand and has enough time to do it? And then that person kind of just goes and helps and unblocks, right? So for me, even today, there is very little differentiation between like an official board member and a board observer. I view it as one and the same. And even when we have community members come in and join like the public board meetings or join the board channel or whatever it is, and they collaborate with us, I don't see much difference. It's like we're all working on the same project. But that hopefully kind of highlights some of the inner workings. I think like most recently, an example there would be, the board or individuals on the board were just helping unblock a project in order to get funding, and in order to set it up on Open Collective, and in order to kind of like write up a post about it. It's like a lot of that is, there is no decision making there. It's just more of support.
Eelco, you said earlier that the board is not supposed to make technical decisions or make take a direction. So on the side, it actually said very clearly the board is not responsible for taking technical leadership decisions or direction. Why is that specifically? And who leads the project if it's not the board?
Yeah, that's a good question. So certainly originally back in 2015, the project kind of ran itself as a typical open source project. I mean, it's run by the people who have commit access and who write the code. There was no need for the board to act as a sort of decision-making body. That was done by the contributors. Now, as the project gets bigger and more complex, at some point that doesn't really work anymore, and you need some sort of governance structures, like our RFC process, and maybe you need somebody that sets a roadmap, that sort of thing. And maybe those structures need to be empowered by the board to make those decisions, but it shouldn't be the board where we discuss these things. The board is not the place where we're going to talk about whether we should adopt System D, Network D, or something like that. That's not the right place for that.
Yeah, and to add also color on that from my side, I think we all very much believe in the core concept of what we see in open source and why we've all been in open source for a very long time. And that's like the duocracy concept of all of us are here because we think this is pretty neat. We love it. We want to work on it. There's a variety of reasons that we're all here for it. And I think the folks willing to put in the time should have the power. So that's why I think the board really doesn't have a say in making a lot of these decisions, but more of like, hey, if the community is rallying around, this is something that we need, I think the board needs to be there and needs to have the foundation in order to make sure that that need or that requirement coming in from the community has the funding, the legal structure, whatever it is, to go and execute, right, and not be blocked. So hopefully we can also maintain that for as long as possible, where if people believe in something, if the community wants something, and we're also part of the community, right? So we're all individuals contributing back. So I'm also speaking for myself, then there's going to be room for that and space for that to keep happening, right? That green field should stay there all the time.
We'll continue with my questions in a couple of minutes, or in a minute. I want to remind our audience to send us your comments and questions. Sylvan just posted on Matrix. He wasn't aware that Jonas is only a board observer. Maybe it should be updated on the website because it's not indicated. But everyone else, if you have any questions, this is the moment to ask the NixOS Foundation board, 2 representatives, 2 members of the board, your questions about how the project is doing, what you're interested in, how the board can help you maybe with your project. Yes, so maybe get in more detail. What is it that you're doing to support the community, to empower community members? You said so you're unblocking things by providing a legal and formal structure to help with financials. But what else is it that you're doing, Eelco?
Sorry, I had some audio. Can you say that again?
Yeah. What is it exactly that you're doing apart from providing some legal framework and opportunities to step up? How are you empowering community members to do things?
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, we sort of started doing this last year, and we're still working on this. But one of these things is something like the infrastructure team. We want to make sure that, the infrastructure team has a defined membership. We know who's in it, and that those people have the right access, and that they know that they are authorized to work on the infrastructure. And in the past, that was very vague. You had some people who have access to certain machines, and so that was not a good situation. So we were trying to improve that. And also, I mean, we had a lot of teams in the project, like a NixCon team or a marketing team, a website, and so on. But it was often kind of unclear what their status was. Was this sort of an official thing? How did they relate to the foundation? So one of the first things we said is we want different types of teams. I mean, anybody can start a impromptu team for, say, improving Python packaging in Nix packages. And you don't need our backing for that. But if you want some sort of official support, then maybe you want to sort of become a more official team, and then you get listed on the website. But then we also need to know who's on that team and who's the contact, and exactly what is their charter or their goal, and maybe their roadmap. So yeah, that's how we sort of started trying to formalize what the teams inside the Nix project are.
So about that support, Ron, what is the support that teams would get from the board or from the foundation?
I do want to add on that point before we dive into the specific support, is that we also have been discussing the fact that it's not just about teams. It's also about individuals. I think we have incredibly, insanely individuals in the community. And for us today, it goes beyond just team empowerment. I know we keep saying team empowerment. It's just like contributor empowerment, I would say. Sometimes that contributor is the form of like, hey, I'm a solo contributor and I really care about this, and we want to do everything we can to make sure that you can do that. And sometimes it's a bunch of contributors that get together and formulate a team, or there's some structure around it. But I think that was one important call out I wanted to make. In terms of the support, I think Eelco covered a good few of them. I think one is that it's kind of like the life stages, right? Ideally, as Nix becomes bigger and more well-known, we kind of transition from like, adolescence to teenage years to adulthood. And there's even micro things, right? Even though we need, like, we're coming and saying, hey, the board doesn't make technical decisions. We're just here to empower and push forward. And we kind of sit on both sides. So yeah, we're on the board, but we're also individual contributors in certain areas. When this project was smaller, right, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, having that unspoken standard was okay, because we kind of all, the community knew each other. It was smaller, more tight knit. But as we get bigger and new people come in, someone needs to kind of set that expectation and remind them that they are empowered to do the greenfield and kind of the duocracy. And I think that's also a really important aspect, right? Even though it's kind of a baseline, something that we need to inscribe and talk about very often. In terms of the specific support, right? So I think it comes down to a few areas. One is just directly rolling up the sleeves and being individual contributors, just like everyone else inside the projects that mean more. Because I think this is not just the board or just the foundation. I think there's a good set of folks that have horizontal view of everything, of larger areas of Nix. It's hard to say everything in Nix today. And I think those folks are really impactful and meaningful when they come into projects. Valentine, I think you're one of them. And I think that's one. The second is obviously funding, right? So helping either acquire funding from outside. We've done that multiple times. And like, that was one of the things we've tried to do in 2023, instead of individuals or teams going and trying to raise funding on their own, having kind of like the name brand and the force of this like board NixOS Foundation at tagline, make it more official. Because at the end of the day, when people look outside into Nix, they don't necessarily understand what's going on. They see like formal names and informal names. So wherever we can do there, I think 2023, that had a lot of instances happen across NGI and SDF and other like documentation team. So I think it's the fundraising piece. And another one that that we've been focusing on quite a bit is also the partnership side. So partnership with AWS and them coming in and sponsoring our S3 cache. Like, I think that was a huge effort. And that's a partnership that's hard to maintain outside of like, as an individual or as just a contributor. And that's something that I think the board needs to be accountable for. So AWS partnership, GitHub, things that matter to the community, I think the board needs to be involved in on the partnership level and keep maintaining those areas. And the last bit, which kind of ties to the first one, going back to the duocracy, just being there to say, again, have these conversations, right? So it's like at NixCon, I think, Valentine, you were running a lot of these like workshops, and just to be there like and say, yes, this is exactly what we need. Because a lot of times some folks might worry, are they overstepping? Are they stepping on anyone's toes? And it's concerning, right? As the community grows, it's a big online community. Someone might love what you're doing and someone might not. And I really want to make sure that we're there to kind of help push that forward. So those are some of the practical things that I've seen recently.
Yeah, speaking of these roles and more explicit expectations, here's a question on Matrix by Hugo. How do you keep a balance between technical and non-technical work and the work for the foundation and your job? Eelco, how do you separate your concerns? How do you separate the hats that you're wearing, the multiple hats?
Yeah, good question. I mean, so the work for the foundation is not too much. I mean, it's a certain number of hours per week. So currently, since Rob from us quit, I have to do all of our tax stuff. So recently we got an admin, and hopefully she can offload some of that work for me. So that's kind of the biggest part of what I do right now, the financial stuff and the tax stuff. So I guess that's, I don't know, half a day or so per week. So it's manageable.
And what about the community support role versus technical work? I mean, you're also on the Nix maintainers team. You also have you work at with or at determinant systems, however you call it, and hack, right? You supposedly hacking.
Yeah, so that's a lot of time, but that's kind of separate from the foundation aspect. Although, yeah, I guess sometimes it kind of runs into each other. So yeah, I'm not keeping track of exactly how much time I spend on each of these things. It's probably for the best. Do you know, Ron, how much time you spend on foundation-related things?
Depends on if you ask me or my wife. I think I'm similar to Eelco. I do not want to think about it, because if I think about it, I'm like, oh, damn. I think you're approximately right. I would say between half a day to a full day a week of work goes into like foundational stuff, and then probably another half day. Now I'm thinking about it. And now another half day, to a day of work goes to like just general community stuff and IC stuff across the community, right? If it's like whatever, and I think it also comes in spikes, obviously, like pre-NixCon, the last one, I think I was just like 3 days a week going at a lot of different things. December, I think it's also there was a spike. Like we just did the whole S3 long-term item, so there was a little bit more than usual, like admin stuff, like they come in. But at the end of the day, I think we're all crazy enough to love it, and therefore when we don't necessarily think about the exact hours, it's good. And I think you asked about like the wearing the different hats. Then Eelco didn't share that he has hats that he switches between. He's not wearing them now. No, I'm kidding. I think for me personally, it's just that there's a very, I literally kind of feel like I switch, literally a hat when we're working on Nix stuff and we're with the Nix community and everything we're doing. And versus when we're like working on Flox things. And there is, I think you can see that inside of Flox, like a lot of the core culture is around contributing to Nix and investing in Nix. So it's like recently like NixCon North America is something that we really want to get off the ground. So there is that bleeding over, but hopefully it's just been positive bleeding over from both ends. So I think that's my perspective.
Ron, you also talked about you being there as individuals on the board, but all of you as individuals are backed by a company. So all of you have salaries. Are you getting paid for working on the foundation either by the company or by the foundation itself?
I wish that would justify the weekends, I guess, but no. The explicit charter is that board and foundation members do not get paid to do the work on the board. So I don't believe any of us are paid for it.
Yeah, that's correct.
So how is it?
We get paid by our employers, who I can't speak for Ron, but he's his own boss. So, but I assume his company lets him do this.
Yeah, and on my end, it's definitely like coming out of my non-work budget. I personally do not get paid for it, and it's fine. So,
but still, all of you are at a company. Is that on purpose, that every very large, well-known company that has something to do with Nix is represented on the board? Eelco?
It's sort of on purpose. I mean, so these are all individuals who, and the companies they work for have a big stake in the success of Nix and are big contributors to Nix. So it wasn't completely random that we ended up with the current board, but it's certainly not a requirement that board members have to work for a commercial Nix company. In fact, it would be great if we had board members who aren't and who sort of represent the non-commercial Nix community. So say I don't know, students or whatever who work on Nix, or individuals who don't hack on Nix as part of their job.
I would also say that I think it's like the opposite was where we ended up, right? Because I think there's very high impact ICs. These high impact ICs ended up being parts of companies, and that's why it's like the board has individuals, right, that are also working for Nix-based companies, because I think that just rationally also those are the folks that would either be the most excited or have actual time to spend or interest to spend on Nix. But just like Eelco said, the board in no way was kind of formulated because, let's take the big companies and let's find a representative. It was more, here's a bunch of individuals. And yeah, I mean, if you look at the community and you look at the folks doing some, like Valentine, for instance, like, you know, you're also working for a company that does some Nix work as well.
Let me dig deeper into that. Is that is that initiative driven by individuals, as you say? Is it just a coincidence that they hadn't ended up working at those companies, or like as a positive?
No, I don't think it's a coincidence. I think it's just that, again, logically, right? There's just a higher chance that if someone is willing to put in much more effort, has much more deeper knowledge of Nix, there's a higher chance that he would be working as well on something that is Nix based, right? But that wasn't like a prerequisite. Like Eelco said, board members coming in, you're not required to be part of a company. You're not required anything in that regard.
What can one do if, say, if Nix users wanted some representation on the board? What Eelco said, well, you kind of just talk to the board and you'll get an interview. Is that how it works? If you want more
I think that's a good question. I think, first of all, I do think Nix users have a representation on the board because one of the board members is a Nix user. But yeah, I think that's why we have a lot of channels. Like, we have the open board calls, we share the board meetings, everything coming out of the board pretty much becomes an open project that gets posted about, and anyone that cares about it can get involved. We now also have like Nix Foundation Unblock Fridays. One happened this morning where, again, anyone can join. We talk about anything. So definitely, there's also the Matrix channel. Like, we've been trying, there's also the GitHub issue tracker. So we've been trying to make it as accessible as possible. Like, if you have an idea, you have a thing you want to talk about, you want to bring it up, it's like, I think we're extremely open and we very much would want to encourage more of that.
Okay, let me remind the audience to send your questions and comments. You're part of the show, you're designing the show, you make it come to life. I also, of course, have a stack of questions, an infinite stream of questions. One of them is, let's talk about what the board, the foundation, is currently doing. What is apart from doing taxes and financials and like doing meetings with potential or current partners, what's currently on your mind, Eelco?
Well, so obviously one of the things is NGI and Summer of Nix, but you know all about that, Valentine. But that's sort of an ongoing thing. I guess one of the most critical things right now is reducing our S3 storage costs. So a while ago, the company that had sponsored our S3 bucket for something like 10 years stopped doing that. So we managed to get some sponsoring by AWS, but they do want us to make some effort to reduce our storage costs because we have never done any sort of garbage collection on cache.nixos.org. And ideally, we don't want to do that, but that does require some technical work. So that's one of the big issues right now. So how can we reduce the costs, ideally without having to throw away some historical data from the binary cache?
Why is that historical data so important?
Yeah, well, so if you want to check out so there's the reproducibility aspect. So if you check out a historical commit of Nix packages, ideally you should be able to just build that. Now, in theory, that should work without a binary cache. However, Nix expressions tend to refer to tarballs all over the internet, and those might have disappeared. So as long as you but we have those things in the binary cache. So as long as we keep that around, we can reproduce all those packages, and there might be people who depend on that. So if you've been deploying your servers on some historical revision of NixOS, you wouldn't want to wake up some morning and find out that suddenly that has started rebuilding everything from source, or begin to fail to build. So yeah, that's one major thing. The other thing is that there might be some data mining that can be done on all those historical builds. So that's why there are a couple of people who are very interested in not deleting that data.
And so what exactly can be done in terms of engineering work? Is that like is it really setting up infrastructure, or what is this solution approach about?
Yeah, so right now there are a couple of people who are working on deduplication. So right now you have this, what is it, 600 terabytes of data in the binary cache, and a lot of it is almost identical. So if we upgrade something like glibc in Nix packages, then everything gets rebuilt, but the resulting binaries are almost the same. So there's a lot of deduplication that you can do there, but we're not doing that in our S3 bucket. So if we stored that stuff in a more intelligent way, we could probably save a lot of storage costs. But then to still have the binary cache work as it always has, we need to reassemble those deduplicated bits of data, and that requires development work. And so that's currently happening. And of course, we need to show that scales and that it can support cache.nixos.org, which of course gets a lot of traffic, so it cannot be something that runs on our little servers in somebody's basement. So ideally, we have all that reassembly running on Fastly edge nodes, and so that's a bit of a research project. So that's happening right now. So hopefully, in the next couple of months, we can get that to work. Get a lot of storage cost savings. And if not, then maybe we need to look for some alternative, like doing a garbage collect.
Yeah, we actually have audience questions, more detailed questions about the cache. It's a hot topic right now. But before that, Ron, you're also, the foundation board is also sponsoring events that relate to Nix. What about that?
Yeah, I think this is just a general part. So I think the two biggest items for us for next year that we're really trying to think about, and I think I was super happy to see them pop up and as community discussions at NixCon. So again, shout out anyone that's interested in any of this, reach out, get involved. There's a bunch of different channels to do this with us because it has to be community centric and community led, is the realm of like fundraising and fund allocation. So I think we've been, right, it's kind of, we're trying out a lot of things because the foundation is now doing much more than it did, and we're trying to scale and grow with the community and with the needs. So we've been kind of alpha testing a bunch of different mechanisms. The first one we did was just, hey, what if we took a budget, defined it, saw how much we have left after holding some cash aside for, S3 falling apart or having a lifeline for 6 months for the entire community to keep the lights on, and how can we start allocating it into micro areas, right? So I think the first thing was like, how can we help more people get together and do Nix? And I think that was just a great A/B test. I think so far it's been going super well. I think I'm still underwhelmed by the amount of requests for people that want to get together and do Nix. So request more stuff and get together more. But now we're starting to experiment with like full project funding, right? So it's like take for account the S3 cache, which is obviously something that we need to start maintaining sustainably in a scalable way long-term. And there's also kind of a partner interaction there because AWS is currently sponsoring it. And we also want to show AWS that we're thinking about it, thoughtful, and we're optimizing it and not just letting that kind of curve up and up and up. And I think that's the first experimentation there. And I'm also genuinely very curious about people's thoughts. Like, how should that be run in the years to come? How should funds be allocated? There's a lot of different ideas on how to do that, but it's a two-sided coin, right? Fundraising and then fund and resource allocation.
Yeah, we'll definitely go.
Maybe to add to that, so it also right now puts us in a bit of an awkward spot where we said we don't make technical decisions, but for stuff like technical funding requests, like the S3 deduplication, right now it's really only the board that can decide whether to spend money on that, and that requires us to make a bit of a technical decision that this is a direction that is worth spending money on. Ideally, I guess we would have some sort of core team or whatever that would make those kinds of decisions, and then the board just says okay, and then signs the check.
Yeah, if I had to magic wand scenario that, I know we're not diving into that topic right now, but just to dive into it because we've been thinking about it a bit, magic wand scenario, let's say 3 years from now, the ideal scenario is that the foundation manages the budget, manages the fundraising, has an allocation, does all the P&L, right? Profit and loss calculations. How much do we need in our treasury fund in order to maintain Nix for at least a year, not just 6 months? If everything crashes and we need to self-fund Nix for a year, having that treasury in the side. Now taking the rest, the ideal scenario is that community reaches out, whether if it's like a core team, an individual, whoever it is, it's like, here's this thing, we need to do it, here's why, here's a proposal. Ideally, there's some community rallying around it where a good chunk of the community, either again via the core team, RFC, or whatever process, say, yes, we really need this. And now funding will help make this happen either faster or at all. And then that gets to the foundation. And now the foundation can do more of the fiscal work and be like, okay, this requires, I don't know, 50,000 euros for a year. We can safely allocate, let's say, 20,000 euros and help you fundraise the 30,000 and kind of find formulas that mesh well and are symbiotic, where the foundation mainly has to make like the fiscally responsible and the fiduciary responsibilities around that. So I think that's like a magic wand ideal scenario in our head.
Yeah, we'll definitely get back to this. This is an interesting topic. I'll read the audience questions, some technical questions here on Matrix. Lawrence is asking, if the foundation wants to reduce the size of cache.nixos.org, what are your thoughts about distributed solutions such as Trustix, IPFS, or BitTorrent? They could focus on publishing signed digests for given store paths. There's a discussion on Trustix and the public Nix cache. There's a long-winded discussion on Discourse about this. Eelco.
Yeah, so I mean, ideally, the foundation does not get into that sort of technical discussion. But of course, given the current situation, we might have to. So my personal feeling is stuff like IPFS, I mean, that would be really great if we could move the entire binary cache to something like IPFS. But it also needs to be very performant. And I mean, I haven't used IPFS in a while, but my experience in the past was that it's kind of slow. And I mean, with cache.nixos.org, checking whether a NAR exists in the cache, that takes a few milliseconds because Fastly and S3 are very quick. And I mean, I don't know if IPFS can manage that sort of performance. So, but it might be an alternative for sort of the historical data. So we could say cache.nixos.org will just have the sort of the hot data, so the currently supported releases, and we move everything else to IPFS, and we need to get some people, of course, to mirror that, but that doesn't need to be super fast, and it doesn't need to be replicated. Yeah, so that could be a possibility, but again, I mean, that's not something that the board should really get into the sort of the little details.
Yeah, to add on to that, like I think we've made public already back at NixCon and a little before that. There's a few different channels where we're super encouraging people to kind of get together around and start discussing these things. This is where I see board members coming in as individual contributors and being like, yeah, we're part of this. There's no hierarchy here. So I'm plussing like Eelco's comment about it. It's like, if you don't feel there's a channel, or there's a channel that is stagnating and you don't feel like there's a place to talk about it, then like that's where we can help out and be like, yo, let's create a new channel and let's all get in here again and start discussing things. But yeah,
and so we have weekly meetings now. So there is a team working on the S3 deduplication, and so yeah, please join those if you have ideas about how to address our storage problems.
Yeah, Sylvan's probing more deeply. So he says, is it really worth keeping the entire historical cache? Who really needs 10-year-old build artifacts or tarball?
Well, that was sort of my thinking as well. So a month or two ago, I made an issue in the NixOS org configurations repo where I proposed running a garbage collect. But so yeah, there are people who really would prefer to keep all that stuff. And so whatever we do, a garbage collect is very scary because it's only after you deleted it that you find out that maybe you needed it. So we need to be very careful about how we.
So what Eelco is proposing is a pseudo garbage collect, where we fake a garbage collect, and then we see who we give. We garbage collect for those 12 hours. We set everything else aside, and we see who comes and complains and what breaks. I say we roll it out. Technical decision made.
Exactly.
Sounds like a cheap one. But apart from that, there's more questions about money and direction and resources. John is asking on LinkedIn, I've heard rumors of Microsoft trying to embrace, expand, extend, extinguish NixOS. How do we take funding from groups that might try such tactics?
I would be very interested in those rumors because I haven't heard that.
Plus one to that, John, if we're happy to follow up, and this goes more potentially also on the partnership side. So if you have more details, I don't know, feel free to share them or reach out, and we'd obviously love to dig into it.
But so for the first two E's, the embrace and expand bit, I mean, well, that's great if they want to contribute to Nix, and then presumably if they depend on it, then they will start also financially supporting. And maybe they can fund our binary cache, so then all our problems are solved, right? So the extinguish part, of course, we're not cool with, but.
So you've talked about a potential or possible core team multiple times. What is that core team supposed to be about?
I mean, well, it doesn't exist right now, but so other projects have some sort of, apart from a board, there's some sort of technical leadership, like I think the Rust. So you have the Rust Foundation, but there's also it's called the Rust core team or something like that. That kind of sets the technical roadmap. So I mean that sounds like a good division of work. So you don't have the foundation getting into technical discussions. So they do have financial, social, organizational stuff. Then there is a core team of experts, maybe made up of representatives from the sort of the lower level technical teams. So we could have something like that. Maybe we would have a core team that has a representative from the Nix team and the Nix packages team and the infra team and so on.
Valentin, if you want, I made a level like second grade drawing a few months ago. It was actually at NixCon. I can share screen. But you need to give me the thumbs up. Am I allowed to share my screen?
Sure.
All right, let's do it. I don't know if this will work. We haven't practiced this. Let's see, share screen. Well, how does this work? Oh, okay. Okay, check this out.
Okay.
I don't know if this works. I don't know what people are seeing, but this is my fancy drawing. This nice. we chatted a bit about this at NixCon because I think the concept that we were trying to show here is that there's no hierarchy. Foundation is part of this NixOS community bubble. There's a bunch of flakes all around, or Nix logos. I don't know, whatever we want there. The concept is exactly kind of like what Eelco was referencing. It's just that the foundation handles all the fiduciary duties, everything that we talked about, but there is some gap there where ideally a core team could take on. And ideally that core team can be mix of like team leads, project leads, and individuals that all come together and kind of make more of these centralization of the technical decisions or technical due diligence around things before, at that certain stage. So hopefully this drawing is inspiring, and
definitely
we can talk more about it when folks are interested.
Yeah, here's another last, because we're running out of time, question from a viewer. Hugo asks, any chance of changing from funding by donation to other business models like others open source organizations did? I'm not sure what this
that's
could
a
be.
Really good question, by the way, Hugo. Cool question. Some quick brain dump for me on that. I think, again, this ties into another conversation that happened at NixCon and should probably extend about like, there was a conversation, Valentin, did you lead that one? I remember it was the community and commercial entity relationship that partially touched other business models about funding Nix, right? Like, do we sell a service? Do we sell, because donations are, you don't get anything for it, right? You kind of give us money because you think we're cool, but we can also like have sponsorship where you donate $1 bazillion and like Eelco and I wear your face on a t-shirt for a week when we walk around the streets of, I don't know, NixCon, North America. So I think there's a lot of models that we can try, and I'm genuinely curious about how the community is feeling, because these will definitely create dynamics with commercial entities that are going to fund at the end of the day. It's going to be commercial entities that are very different than the hands off, here's some cash because we need you to exist or we think you're awesome mode.
Yeah. I mean, there are projects such as NGI, which is formally a donation, but really, I mean, we're doing particular work in the ecosystem, in the open source ecosystem. So it's not just commercial entities funding Eelco, but could the foundation like provide services? Like if a company wanted a lot of Nix packages, could they just pay the foundation? The foundation would distribute the money to community members or something like that?
I mean, legally, yes, I think so. I mean, we don't have employees at the moment, but like what we do in NGI, where we sort of route to the contributors who can do the work, we might be able to do something like that.
Okay, well,
but
there you go for your next.
At the moment, yeah, we're not doing that.
Okay, we are slowly coming to an end. Most importantly, is how can people help getting things unstuck? How can people help do what you do or help you doing what you're doing? And what are your plans for the future? 2 questions. Sorry, start with the first one. Ron, how can people help?
Yeah, I would say more involved. If you care about it, we super encourage it. There's no like dumb question. There's no dumb idea. There's no like stepping on anyone's toes. I really want that kind of culture to be just collaborative, duocracy focused. So you have thoughts, let's talk about them. Anywhere, if there aren't enough channels where we can communicate, let's make more of them. But Matrix, Discourse, emails, just, you know, these kind of calls when we have on Friday or on Wednesdays when we do like open board calls, just get involved or just spin things up on your own, right? We can help out, but like just like the Nix workshops that ran at NixCon were super helpful, got a lot of community members, including ourselves as individuals, kind of involved in brainstorming. I think that's where we'd love to see more. Eelco, I don't know if you had other areas top of mind that can be helpful there.
Yeah. So I agree with that, and also probably still not enough people are aware that they can just apply for funding. Like if you want to do a Nix meetup, you can just go to the foundation GitHub repo and create an issue there that you want this much money for your meetup, and it will probably be approved. And in general, don't be afraid to ping us via any channel.
Okay, so now the actual last questions. What's on your mind for the future? What do you have plans? What's the vision for the NixOS Foundation and the Nix ecosystem?
I think real quick from my end, we want to grow a bit. We want to make sure that we keep having the voice of the entire community everywhere. The 2 top of minds for me are fundraising and fund resource allocation. So that's one. The second one is individual and team empowerment. How can we do more intentionally, not just as the board, but as a community, to empower people that are willing to contribute and do some awesome stuff for us and for the entire community, obviously. And then there's some smaller things like S3. Like I really want us to figure that out. So yeah. Eelco, what about you?
I agree with all of that. And also this core team, some sort of technical leadership. That's becoming more relevant, especially when we get these funding requests for stuff like S3 duplication. Ideally, we don't handle that at the board level. We'd like to have a team that can make those decisions for us. So I think that's important to figure out. And I guess we also need to start thinking about how we're going to do board rotation, because we also don't want to do this forever. And then we need to think about, you get into all these governance issues like should we have elected board members like Debian, or should it just be the board that selects our own replacements? Those are all very tricky questions. And I don't really have good answers to them at the moment.
Well, then there's a lot to do for you in the upcoming months and possibly years. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you for this very informative discussion. The next show will be on Sunday, December 10th. It will be the last show of this show. How do you call it? It will be on Sunday, December 10th at 19:30 UTC. We will meet Alexander Grolot from the documentation team and talk about what we call Grab a Shovel, the journey to better documentation, something that has been concerning us for a lot of time. Thank you very much for having been here. Thank you very much, everyone, for watching. Thanks for the great questions today. It was very interesting, very exciting. And see you next time at the 2023 Nix Developer Dialogues. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Valentine. Bye.